Hi everyone. Today we're going to be making a camera obscura, and so get excited. We're going to start learning about ray optics. So things that we'll need to make a basic or rudimentary camera obscura, you'll need some sort of box. So get some sort of favorite box that you have hopefully just lying around. Here I'm going to actually be demonstrating making a camera obscura just using a standard soda box of 12 cans. So here, or pop, sorry. Sorry if I offended some of those people out there that say pop instead of soda. But regardless, this box actually has a lot of the features that we would actually need to do for standard boxes, such as just a normal corrugated shipping box or something like that. So I recommend, probably most people have these already just lying around waiting to be recycled anyways, but we'll repurpose it and make a camera obscura for today's little experiment. In addition to some sort of box that's closable on all 6 sides, you'll need something to display the image that we're going to be creating in our camera obscura. So just find some sort of white sheet of paper, be anything from just regular printer paper. You can go and maybe repurpose some of that old Christmas wrapping paper. You can just use the back side or something like that if you have some little scraps and whatnot that just can't quite fit anything anymore. And then we'll also need some other sort of sheet of paper, something that can darken particularly some of the holes that may be created in our camera obscura in order to create that image that we'll eventually see on the screen. You can use either something like black construction paper, or you can use tin foil. Now, just as a word of warning, if you're going to be using tin foil, just make sure that on the outside, whenever you tape down any of the tin foil, that you use the or the least reflected side of the tin foil itself. We don't want to be, say, going outside and shining the sun into people's faces or into our own eyes for that matter, so just be careful with that. All right, in addition to those components, you'll need just standard pair of scissors, some sort of tape. I recommend using some sort of opaque type tape. So something like Scotch tape, electrical tape, or duct tape will work probably the best for this, considering I tend to use this in order to fill in seams where extra light might come into our box and obscure the image that we don't want to have happen. And then lastly, in order to make our pin size hole, we'll need obviously a pin. So if you have something like a sewing pin, a safety pin, you don't necessarily have to use that. If you have some leftover wire and it's sturdy enough, you can always just use that. We just need something to poke a nice little hole into either our black construction paper or our tin foil. And then what we'll do is we'll see the effects as we make the hole bigger. What does that do to our image in the long run? So we'll start with a very small hole, so we'll start with a pinhole and then just see what that image creates, and then we'll try and make it bigger and bigger and see what happens when we do that. Alright, so let's get started with our soda box, pop box. So if you don't do this, you'll need to cut off this tab or just tear it off. I'll just cut it just to make this look a little nicer. Alright, and this part of the box will actually be used as the means of creating the hole in which will basically allow the light to go through and then produce the image on the back of this box on our screen that will eventually tape to the back of this. Here on the side, we already have a nice viewing hole already for us to kind of view through, so that we can actually view the image that we'll eventually see, and then we'll just kind of block off a little bit of this hole so it's not so big that it lets too much ambient light into our scene. So that's basically what you'll need. A lot of this opaque paper, I recommend the darker the better, or the more opaque the material is, the better it will obscure that ambient light we don't want. Alright, so the first things first is we need to put our screen in the back of our box before we start sealing off any of the holes and seams before we get to that point. So grab your paper that you're going to be using as your screen, and then just double check to make sure that your screen is cut to at least, so just kind of vaguely shape up to your box to some degree like that, and then just kind of estimate how much you need to cut off in order to fit it to the back of your box. And don't worry too much if it doesn't cover the entirety of the back of the box. We just want some sort of viewing screen for our purposes. And like I said, please use something that is not reflective. Please, please, please do not use any sort of tinfoil or reflective type material for your screen. We do not want you to inadvertently look at the sun for some reason and get blinded by that. So just be careful. You want something that is non-reflective, and it will diffuse that light safely for your viewing. Side note, if and when a solar eclipse happens, this is a perfect way of viewing a solar eclipse through a camera obscura, considering that we're going to make a nice, tidy, small camera obscura that can just go with you anywhere. Makes it quite easy to travel with. You don't need something so large or big. Next, what we'll do is we'll attach the back to the back of the box our screen. So just take whatever paper you're using, and then if there's any markings on one side, make sure that you tape to the marking side, and then leave the blank side untaped, because that is what we want as our screen. I just do sort of tape loops like this, and I just put on two, one on each side. So just do that. Once you've done that, you taped your paper like such, just shove it in. It's the nice thing about this type of box is that, at least for me, my hand can fit in here, and then just pat it down to the end of the box and just make sure that it's secured nicely to the back of the box like such. Okay, so hopefully you can see the screen in the back of the box like such. Alright, now the first thing that we'll do is make sure that any sort of holes, like at the corners of the boxes, are sealed off and not creating more points in which ambient light can come in, or even creating another sort of secondary camera obscura that may interfere with the overall image that we're trying to create from the actual point that we would like to make in the end. So let's do that. I'll be right back, and then what I'll do is just kind of tape around these edges, and then I'll be also taping along these seams just in case if you see that sort of bends in the box itself may have openings in which light can get in through there and sort of interfere with our image that we want to create on our screen. So I'll be right back. Alright, and we're back, and you can see here that I've taped at the corners as well as the seams in order to make sure that ambient light doesn't try and seep into our camera obscura. and you can always try and make that look neater, nicer, however you're going to do that. Now, just as a side note, the standard corrugated boxes tend to keep a darker room inside the camera obscura itself rather than this thinner type of cardboard, but you'll see that this cardboard is sufficient enough that it will create a dark enough environment that you can see the image just fine. So don't worry too much about that. In the end, hopefully you'll still be able to see a nice clear image from your camera obscura. Next, what we'll do, at least for our soda boxes, for our handle, we'll try and close off part of the handle itself in order for us to just get a small viewing window about this size. And we'll just use some tin foil, just some small strips of tin foil to just kind of cover over that, as well as where this perforations occur in the handles themselves. We'll kind of hopefully cover those up and make sure that ambient light isn't seeping through that. So once I'll be right back with that completed. All right, so we're back. I'll kind of demonstrate this as well. So I've just cut off some tin foil here, and we'll just place it quite right about there. And then we'll just kind of fold over the tin foil like that. Tin foil just like that. We'll try and need to make sure it's much more smoother than I'm making it. But essentially covers over the perforation and covers slightly over the handle itself in order for us to make a smaller viewing window, so it, the room inside the camera obscura is a little bit darker. So just tape along the edges. You can tape just a little bit over that if you want to. If the tape is going to be a little too much, you can always raise this up a little bit higher, and then just use some of the tape as well as obscuring material for making the viewing window smaller in the end. So just kind of tape all the way around, securing this darkening material around the viewing hole. So I'll have that done on both sides once I come back. All right, so now here I have, I accidentally had one of these with the more reflective side. I'm sorry about that. Just make sure that you don't do what I did with that and got a little hasty with that. But you can see here how I sort of taped around the edges here and made the viewing hole a little bit smaller for viewing the image that will be created by our camera obscura. And then you can kind of see that I went a little bit over over this edge here with some tape, just to kind of make it a little smaller and a little bit more a little bit straighter in that regards. So next what we'll do is, since I used part of my tin foil, I hopefully have enough tin foil left over in which I can just simply cover this portion of the box like this, and then wrap over on this side this part of the tin foil, and then the other side, in order to sort of cover up the fact that usually these soda boxes kind of have a little bit of curvature inward from the perforation where you open it up to get your drink out of. So effectively what you want to do is make sure that all of it is kind of covered up. I recommend doing the sides first, and then towards the bottom here, and then do kind of make sure to figure out where, if it does kind of have a tab here, make sure to not cover this up too much with tape, as the hole that we're going to make will be hopefully somewhere in this region here. The closer it is to the center, the more the better the image that we're going to actually make on the screen itself. It's not going to be slanted in any way or distorted, or it's going to be distorted less when we try and view things through our camera obscura. Now, obviously, you can always make this bigger or extend it down even further if you want to, just by using some scissors or some tape, some scissors or a knife to kind of cut that back a little bit if you want to get it a little bit centered. However, you'll probably need a little bit more tin foil than I have left, at least from the amount that I took off in order to accomplish both the viewing hole as well as the end in which I'm going to make the hole for the camera obscura. Now, it's very important that at least for this part that you do have the reflective side towards the box and the less reflective side pointing outward. This will kind of reflect some of the sunlight and will kind of make it a little bit difficult to look at in that sense, but hopefully we're not looking at the sun here, or that we're not pointing it at anybody's face while we're playing around with the camera obscura. But just to kind of reduce that effect, let's use the least reflective side for our camera obscura. Okay, so I'll be right back, and I'll have all this taped up and nicely taut against the cardboard, and then we'll finish up by creating our camera obscura hole with our pin or some sort of object that will make a nice hole inside our material itself. So we'll do that and finish this up, and I'll be right back. All right, now we have our tinfoil here in order for us to make the hole that will eventually allow the rays of light to come through and hopefully create for us an image on the screen towards the back of the box here. And then, so what you'll need is something like a pin or you can use like a mechanical pencil, like I said before, and you may need to kind of feel around where that extra tab was in the perforation of the cardboard. And I recommend just somewhere as close as you can, and then just kind of press in, and then just kind of make a light hole inside the, hopefully you can see that right there. And you just need a very small hole to start this process. Hopefully what you'll see as you make the hole bigger and bigger is that the image should become brighter and brighter and brighter, but something else happens to the image. And part of what you'll need to do is kind of figure out why is it doing that? Why is it causing the image to do what it's doing as we make that hole bigger and bigger and bigger? So that's part of what you'll need to do. The second part of this lab can be kind of useful in sort of demonstrating that light can act as a ray. And so what we can do is we can either sort of qualitatively or even quantitatively determine whether or not the size of the image that we produce in our camera obscura is directly proportional to the size of the object itself. So what that means is that the viewing distance from where the image comes into our camera obscura, so this distance from here to our screen, over the size of the image should be the same as the distance to the object that you're viewing divided by the height of that object that you're viewing. Now, to be fair, in this instance, I asked you to use just regular white paper, but you can always go back in and make some sort of rulers or something on the back there, or use some sort of graph paper that has a known ruling on it, and you can use that as a means to kind of figure out what's going on with the size of the image. Also note that the image that will be produced will be upside down, and that has a particular reason as to why. This also sort of validates to some degree why light acts as a ray as well. And that's something that you'll need to discuss as well, as to why the image that's produced in our camera obscura is upside down and not right side up. As you view it, say, outside your window, or while you're outside just kind of viewing it as is. And so you can do certain things in order to find out those proportionalities and see whether or not those proportionalities are in fact true, that they hold, that the size of the image divided by, or inversely, or that the distance to the screen from the hole divided by the image size is equal to the distance from this hole to the object that you're viewing divided by its height, why that can actually seem to be proportional in that regards. Okay, and so that kind of concludes the camera obscura. One little side note, if you do plan on using a conventional box of corrugated cardboard, or something like a shoebox or something like that, you will need to cut into the box in order for you to sort of put, say, your material that you're going to use in order to create your hole for the viewing of the image on your screen. Once I sealed the box, one thing I had to make sure that I did was mark the side in which the screen is located, because you don't want to forget which side your screen is on and then accidentally cut into it. So I just recommend writing screen on the side that you're using the screen, just so that you're aware of which side that's on before you start cutting. And the next thing that you'll need to do is create your own viewing hole. Now this is towards the back where the hole is located in the camera obscura. I recommend actually going towards the middle or closer to the front where the screen is located. At least the way that I tried to do this, it was a little bit more difficult to see the screen in the end, having it clear back towards the hole. So I recommend putting it closer but not right up on the screen so that you can see that in the end. While you're viewing through it, you'll obviously be putting this up to one of your eye. I also recommend kind of cupping your face in order to essentially prevent more ambient light coming in from the opposite direction and obscuring your vision in that regard. So that's one other thing that I've learned to do with this. And don't hesitate to play around with different shapes of holes as well. You don't necessarily have to be limited to circular holes. You can even try slits. Slits are something else, but something also worthwhile to discuss when we actually go into the wave nature of light after discussing the ray nature of light. So hopefully you enjoyed this, and hopefully you enjoyed this experiment, and I'll talk to you guys later. Stay safe and have fun, and be careful as usual.